Hey, worship leader, welcome back to the channel. I have with me Spencer from Leading Worship Well, and today we're talking about
destroying,
decimating the biggest roadblock in your worship ministry, and we're going to talk about it today, and we're going to give you some tips on how to do this. So I saw a recent video on your channel, Spencer, and I was like, I'm inspired. Actually, I've been seeing a lot of videos, so go check it out. If you're not subscribed to Leading Worship Well, do that right now. He's got some, he's killing it with the YouTube videos, lots of value. I know it's hard work, isn't it, Spencer?
It is, yes.
But you're good at it.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Posting every week is hard work, yes.
It is. And what's your schedule? You post multiple times, right?
I post 2 times a week now, yes.
2 times a week, yeah. Man, that's good. So, watching your video, I was like, this is gold, and I want to share it with the people on my channel too. And so let's let them, give them in the little secret. What is this roadblock, Spencer? What is this roadblock that a lot of us worship leaders deal with?
It is selfishness.
Boom. I wish I had sound effects to include.
Yes.
Selfishness. And so, yeah, we didn't want to title this selfishness, because as soon as worship leaders are like, oh, I'm not selfish, but you are, and you don't even know it, probably. And so we're going to talk about ways that, me and Spencer, all of us, we are selfish because we are human. And humans are, I think we are bent to the self. That's not a new thing. That's sin nature. And Scripture has a lot to say about not being selfish. And so if we as leaders are going to succeed, if we're going to decimate this roadblock in our worship ministries, then we need to get over this selfishness. And the only way to do that is be able to acknowledge it, to pinpoint where it is and where it could sneak up in our worship ministry. So we're going to talk about that today. So there is some scripture references that I wanted to mention, just in case you're thinking the Bible doesn't talk about this. 1 Corinthians 10:24 says, let no one seek his own good, but that of his neighbor. Do not merely look out. This is Philippians 2:4. Do not merely look out for your own personal interests, but also for the interests of others. 2 Corinthians 5. And Jesus, he died for us all so that we might no longer live for ourselves, but for him who died on the cross. Philippians 2. Do nothing from selfishness or empty conceit, but with humility regard others more important than yourself. So this is for every believer, not just worship leaders, but how much even more for us that are supposed to be leading worship from stage. This is important. Scripture speaks about it multiple times. So Spencer, how is one or two ways we're going to be talking about today that this selfishness creeps into our worship ministry?
Well, in my original video, I talked about 4 or 5 ways that it does, but in this video, we're going to cover a bonus 5 ways. The ones that I talked about in my video were sort of things that we do on Sunday, and maybe we can just talk about one of those and then point people to the video if they want to hear all 5 of them. Okay. But I think the biggest one is this idea of our personal worship usurping our corporate worship. And so, did you like that word, usurping?
I even wrote it down as I was watching. I was like, he used the word in that video. You guys go watch the video and count, because I didn't count, but it's a lot.
Did I use it a lot?
You said it a lot.
I needed a usurping counter. Well, we can put it here. But the word usurping, I think of usurping means like overtaking, right?
Yeah.
I think of it specifically. I think it's like whenever a king is ruling and then another king comes in and usurps the throne. Yeah. I think that's sort of the original meaning. But whenever I'm talking about personal worship, usurping corporate worship, I'm talking about our goal during our time together on Sunday is to lead corporate worship and participate in corporate worship. By the way, this isn't just true for us as the leaders, but it's also true for everybody in the church, that there's a difference between our corporate worship time and our personal worship time. And instead of just leading a bunch of personal worship moments where everybody's gathered in the same room on a Sunday morning, we're actually supposed to be worshiping together. And I think that we, in the past decade or so, have kind of done a poor job at that. I know that I've done a poor job at that. I always just facilitate personal worship moments where I'm like, hey, just go between you and God, close your eyes, block out all of the other distractions in the room, and connect with God. But in reality, we're supposed to be aware of the people around us. That's why we're worshiping together. And so that thought process bleeds into our worship leading whenever we take on that mindset and we think, if I'm just up there on stage and I have my eyes closed and I have this perfect time of personal worship, then that's what I'm supposed to be doing, and everybody else will follow along, and they will be moved to have their own personal times of worship. But that is selfishness, because we aren't just called to connect with God one-on-one in those moments. We're supposed to, number one, connect with the people around us, encouraging them and exhorting them and admonishing one another with songs and hymns and spiritual psalms, or spiritual songs and psalms, or whatever that verse is that always gets quoted. And so whenever we don't do that, we're being selfish when we prioritize our personal relationship with God in that moment instead of the relationship with the people around us.
Yeah, I'm so glad you said that, because I feel like this, you said the past 10 years, and I agree, and I still think a lot of people, worship leaders and, members, congregants, people who come in, they feel like I got to come in here and have my personal time. You said in one of your videos, this video we're referring to, you said, it's this idea of, man, I've just been in the world all week long and I need to come Sunday to recharge. And there's a sense of that, because we are encouraging each other. But that's the wrong word picture. Like, we're believers, worshipers all throughout the week. And you said you charge your phone every day, charge yourself every day. Like, you are supposed to be worshiping and in the word all week. The other 6 days of the week is your personal time of worship to fuel yourself. We do something completely different on Sunday when we gather, which is another argument for why I feel like, a lot of this, I won't go to church, we got something to do, I'm just going to watch the live stream. You kind of miss that togetherness that you get when you gather. And so it changes our worship from this personal time with God to, we're doing something completely different. I get to hear voices. I get to hear other people sing the truth of the gospel over myself, and I get to do it for other people, and we encourage each other. So I'm so glad you said that. That's something that I feel like we should continue to say over and over again, because, the dark lights, close your eyes, like you said, using so many songs that, there's all this discussion around it. We're just skimming the surface, but using all these introspective songs, we really set people up to believe this. So we have to work extra hard to say, hey, this is actually different. I love it. What other ways? How does that play in?
Yeah. So I'm just thinking, like, how I don't just like to complain about things. Whenever I go into a meeting, at church or anywhere, there's always people who, they don't ever have a solution to the problem. They just complain about whatever the problem is. It's like, we all knew the problem was there, but we didn't address it because we didn't have a solution. And if we didn't have a solution, I don't know why we're talking about it right now. So what is the solution to the problem? And the solution is twofold, because the problem is twofold. First of all, the problem is ourselves thinking that if we just model worship, people will follow along. But I think a really quick fix for not being selfish on Sunday morning, something super practical that you can do, is to just open your eyes whenever you're leading. Because there's like this 2-millimeter thick barrier that covers our eyes, and it blocks out the rest of the world whenever we're leading worship. And all we have to do to get rid of that 2-millimeter barrier, which is the biggest barrier we create, is just open our eyelids, bring them up, and then we can see our church in front of us. And I think that that's just a tangible reminder for us that we aren't just doing this alone, one-on-one with God, but there's also a horizontal connection. So that's the first solution to the first problem, which is our own selfishness. The second solution to the second problem, which the second problem is the selfishness of the people in our congregation, which, once again, we're included in this, is to start to teach people that, like what Jimmy and I just talked about, that corporate worship is something different than personal worship. And one speaking transition that you can use to teach this is to just encourage them to sing the words of a song over the people around them. Say, hey, I don't want you to focus on yourself in these moments. but we're going to sing these next lines. I can't think of an example right now, but I'm sure you can pick a song where you're praying the words over the people around you and say, I want you to think of somebody else in this room right now and sing these words over them. And I guess if you were charismatic, you'd say prophesy these words over them. But what's your example?
I was just thinking the bridge to the Passion's "It is finished." It says, "Strongholds bowing to the Savior, resurrection power over every circumstance." It kind of covers things that are happening in the room. That's so powerful. And then it says, "His word stands final and forever." Those kind of words are just meaningful to those in the room in that moment.
Yeah, and then you could sing those words over people, but also encourage the people in the room to sing them over each other. So maybe try that on Sunday too. I only said usurp once, so I got to say it again. So try that this Sunday to keep personal worship from usurping corporate worship.
You might be at 7 or 8. We'll
put the counter up. No, you don't want to edit all of that. But.
I'll send it to you. You can edit it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think something else. Okay, so you hit on, teaching your people. I would say coming out of COVID, go to church, encourage your people. I mean, if you're a worship leader and you're on staff, you're probably there, but encourage your people to come. We still do a live stream, but for us at our church, it's for our shut-ins, for those who are sick and can't get there. We do not promote it as, oh, you can't make it this weekend, then just watch it online. I would suggest strongly against that. Encourage your people to show up, because when you're watching it through a TV screen, you're literally not hanging out with me and Spencer right now watching this on YouTube video. We are not really hanging out with each other because we're states away from each other. How much more meaningful would these conversations be if we were face to face? And that's another aspect that we get when we gather with our church body, and we get to have conversations even before and after the gathering, that we get to really see each other, hug somebody if it's safe and COVID's not a thing where you are. If you're going to the movies and to the grocery store, go to church, okay? So, does that sound good? Should I not have said that? I may edit that. I don't know. Okay. That's strong. That's strong enough language. Don't let online church usurp coming gathering. There we go.
Yeah. That's good.
There you go.
Let's talk about some of the things that you had talked about. So that was one of the ones that I talked about in my video. Yeah. So go check out the link in the description below if you want to hear more about that and a few other things that we do while we're leading worship. But Jimmy brought to me a couple that we do whenever we're not leading worship. So
I think one of those. On the stage, there's several of those. Go watch the video. But what about off the stage? We're still leaders on and off the stage. And I was trying to think of several ways that I have probably been selfish over the years. I know a lot of us probably struggle with. So what are some ways off the stage that we struggle with selfishness? We're selfish in how we treat our team members like commodities rather than human beings. I think that's a big one, especially worship leaders that are stressed. You're trying to have planning center full and have no declines, and this week's coming, and my drummer and my guitar player both had to back out for whatever reason, and they're just going to watch online. I think sometimes it can be easy for us to treat them like they're just serving us. And I want to say that our position is to serve the church, and we serve the church by serving our team well, because us, our worship teams are serving God in all this. So it's different levels of serving, and I think sometimes we can flip that. We can become selfish. We can let our selfishness usurp the opportunity we have to serve our team. And there are ways that we treat them like commodities. You saw that statement. Have you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah. I just got the picture in my head, as I'm sure many people watching this video did, of Jesus washing the disciples' feet. And I was thinking, am I expecting my worship team members to wash my feet, or am I washing their feet? Wow. When I get out of worship rehearsal, are my feet pristine, or are my feet still dirty because I spent all my time washing my worship team's feet? In a really deep analogy we just made there. But no, I think the other thing that I thought of whenever you were talking about that, I was doing some, whenever I try to plan YouTube videos, sometimes I'll go through Facebook groups and just read posts and see what worship leaders are struggling with. And one of the posts I was reading was talking about how they're struggling seeing, like, they only see their worship team members as people who can fill spots on planning centers. Like, I just want them to be there so that their name's there, so I can plug them in on planning center and make sure that the position is covered. And I think the remedy for that is understanding that the people are more important than the position.
Yeah.
And also letting your team know that. Like, we can understand that, but we don't always act that way towards our team. And so I think what that looks like is saying, if you only have one bass player, saying, you know what, I always tell people this, you're important, but you're not that important. Like, we can go a Sunday without bass.
Yeah.
We could throw it in the tracks if we want to. I don't lead with tracks at my church. Guess what? I would still lead without a bass, because you're important, but you're not that important. Like, in reality, nobody is that important. Like, I could not show up on a Sunday morning, and I would hope that the church would still function without me, because I'm important, but I'm not that important. And so teaching that to your team as well, like, we care about you more than your position. We care about you as a person who doesn't lead 52 Sundays a year, but gets a week off at least once a quarter, or hopefully more. And so, just teaching your team that they are important, but they aren't that important.
Yeah, and our ministry is unique in this way. I think other ministries could struggle with the same thing. I think of children's ministry, especially like at our church right now. It's like, we have all these classrooms. They have to be background checked, and it's almost more strenuous and more difficult to get people to show up. It's kind of easy for someone to say, hey, play your favorite instrument in front of a lot of people. Like, musicians tend to like doing that. It's hard to get people to serve in children's ministry. But the same thing, I try to tell people, it's not the same way you say it, but I just let them know, like, hey, if this week it needs to just be just me. Like, that's what's the difference between our ministry and children's ministry. If the whole team doesn't show up on the worship team, I can still lead with an acoustic guitar. I don't know what whoever's watching this may be leading with, or what your talents are. But for me, it's like no one could show up and I'll be like, well, we're doing an acoustic set this morning, and that's fine. And so, relieve the pressure of your team to think that, because that's where a lot of burnout happens. Like, oh, Jimmy or Spencer needs me. I got to be there every single week, and their spiritual health might be declining, but they're serving the Lord, and that's not what we want. We want, like you said, not treat them like a commodity. We want what'd you say? It was 2 P's.
The position and the person.
Yeah. We want them to feel like a person, a child of God, rather than just a position on planning center. That's gold. Like the video.
Would you ever say to somebody, you're important, but you're not that important? I don't know if I've actually
That's not
said
my personality.
No. Maybe that's just my personality. I'm pretty sure I've said that to somebody before. Like, listen, you're important, but you're not that important. Yeah. I don't see you saying that, but
I probably wouldn't. I would if it was like, if they were close enough. And I really, in a joking way or something, which,
I say it for real.
Yeah, I know. You're that way. Spencer's
I stare into their soul and I say it.
You are not important, but you are important a little bit. Just not that important. Remember that. Stop being selfish. All right, some other ways. I think about how we talk to people. So whether it's the way we talk to our team or talk to people before and after our services, sometimes, and this can happen for multiple reasons, but we are the center of our own movie, right? Like, we are selfish people. We're self-centered people, and that can come out. Even if you don't feel that way, it can come out in the way you talk to people, whether you're a good listener or you just dominate the conversation, or while you're looking at somebody, my biggest struggle is like looking off somewhere else. And I'm seeing other people while they're pouring out their heart to me about something. So I was thinking about how we talk to people before and after our services is important, because those are the people that we are shepherding during the service. So I feel like that's a very important time to build trust. You can also do that throughout the week, get to know your people, be in a small group. But that time before and after services is a good time for you to just be a real person who is a listener and not just talking about yourself. Have you experienced any of that?
Yeah, I think when I think of that, I think of all of the responsibilities that I have on Sunday, and our schedule at church right now is pretty tight because we have the traditional service at 8:30, and then we have Sunday school classes for an hour, and then I literally have like what do I have? Maybe 20 minutes between Sunday school and the second service to like do a sound check real quick. Yeah, it's not convenient right now.
Wow.
But all of my responsibilities get compressed in like this 20-minute zone. And so I really have to fight, and I'm not saying that I figured it out because I think I do a horrible job of it on Sundays right now, but I really have to fight to not become like that to-do list. Like, I've just got to do all of this stuff right now. I know that happened to me this past Sunday. I was actually preaching at my church, and it was like before the second service, and somebody came up to me and was like, hey, you know the live stream's not working right now? And I was like, I can't do everything. Like, I've got to get ready to preach. And like, it probably wasn't the way that I should have responded. And so I think though also in that, like, selfishness, it's not just paying attention to the person, or unselfishness isn't just paying attention to the one person in front of you right now. Like on Sunday mornings, we do have a responsibility to the larger body. And so sometimes fulfilling that to-do list is actually being unselfish and serving more people. Because like there are certain things that we have to get done on Sunday morning. Yeah. And maybe I'm just saying that because it makes me feel better about myself in this past Sunday. But
yeah, it's fine.
I think there's an element of truth to that. Like at the end of the day, we have a responsibility on Sunday that's bigger than just talking to one person, which I think is, you kind of mentioned it, like what's the solution to that? You shouldn't just be connecting with people on Sunday morning. You should be connecting with them throughout the week.
Yeah. Another one I was thinking about is who we choose to pour our time into and not. And I don't a lot to say other than sometimes there's this person, this type of person that we're like, ooh, I want that person on my team. And in my experience, a lot of times, and maybe this is not relatable, but that cool person, the person you want on stage, in my experience has been maybe unreliable compared to the people that may not fit that what you want on your team. But I've learned over the years, like God has on your team, He has people in your church and relationships that you have for a reason. Don't be that person that like separates, like, oh, I'm not gonna spend as much time with them because they don't fit this imaginary perfect worship leader in my head. Like, pour into everybody and don't be selfish and treat someone with partiality. You know, the book of James talks that way about, and just treat everybody the same. That's a good word to just stay safe and not have like people, you know, speaking bad about you. Like, be a good leader and treat everyone the same. And I'm not talking about skill level. So like someone with a lot of skill, it may play into it, but I'm talking about like the whole package. Like, so for me, I've seen people come into the church and they just like, they have that look and you're like, oh, that would be perfect. And they're actually really talented, but I didn't consider their character as much as I should have. And I've gotten burnt before. Where there's other people who are just maybe not as flashy and whatever it may be, but man, their character is good and they have the heart of a servant and they show up and they're available. And I've just learned over the years to watch out for that. I don't know if that's, what do you think, Spencer? Is that something that you've ever dealt with?
I think of like, as you were saying that, I'm thinking, what is the selfishness in that? And I think the selfishness is that we want our ministry, I'll put that in quotes, we want our ministry to look a certain way. Like we see like the people from Elevation or Passion or Mosaic Music. I don't know if you've seen them before. And like they all have, they're like very, very hip, like denim overalls and stuff.
Is that the Tremble?
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. But like, I'm sure that's the culture of their church because I'm pretty sure they're from California. But like, that's not the culture of my church. But that is like what's glamorized in the contemporary worship music scene is like, you know, the what is it, like flannels and, you know, the tight jeans and the fancy shoes and stuff. And it's like, if somebody walks, I just pictured like somebody walking into church like that, where they've got, and no offense to you if this is you, but you know, they've got like the side of their head shaved and they've got like the
Hawkeye.
Yeah. If Hawkeye were, okay, I wasn't sure if I was offending you or not.
But I
like,
might.
There's nothing wrong with that, but like that's not really what we're looking for. And like I think we can fall into the trap of wanting that for our worship ministry, so we can say, look, I've got this person on my team, and they kind of look like somebody from Elevation Worship. I don't think we'd say that out loud, but like I think that that's the selfishness that I hear in the problem that you're bringing up.
And like you said, it's those things in itself is not an issue. It's that just doesn't equal the character. That doesn't equal the team member that you want on your team. So just making sure that doesn't get in the way. The last two things, I don't know how long our video is, but
we're only at 25 minutes.
Oh, that's perfect. Golden, man. I think sometimes we can be selfish how we run rehearsals. I spoke to a couple worship leaders this past week, and we were just talking about rehearsals. And some people were like, yeah, our rehearsals, they end up going really long. Like, we're talking hours long. One worship leader, he might watch this video. He was saying, and I'm not ripping on this, but I was like, man, that's... So I'm using this as an example, but not for that person in case he does watch this video. But I was like, anyways, they do like 1 month, once a month rehearsals. So they rehearse the whole month because they just have one team, and it ends up being really long. And I don't know if he said that was bad in his context. That's just what they do. But I've heard a lot of team members also complain about, man, I just don't even want to go to rehearsal because it's a drag, it's unorganized. And so one way I've tried to eliminate and make sure that my selfishness is not usurping my rehearsal time is letting them out on time. I say this all the time when I'm auditioning someone at the beginning of rehearsal. I'm like, we're starting on time as best we can. I know people come late for work, and I'm not as harsh on the start time. I mean, we're starting on time, but people might be late. I don't let them, they're not in trouble if they're late because they're coming from work. But I feel like I'm going to be in trouble if I don't let them out on time. So this is that way of serving them and making sure they know that I'm serving them and not being selfish, is letting them out on time, even if we're not done. So my time is 6 to 7:30 p.m. on Wednesday nights. If it becomes 7:30 and we have a whole nother song or two songs, I just say, hey, we're going to cut it off there. Let's practice at home. Come ready to just run through this really quick on Sunday morning, and we'll let God take it from there. And that way, I'm respecting them as a team because it's a sacrifice to come out for an hour and a half or 2 hours or whatever time frame you have. Stick to that, and I think that's another way we can eliminate selfishness. What is your rhythm on that? How
long do you think a worship rehearsal should be? Do you think an hour and a half is a good length?
I guess it would be different for like different contexts. So we usually do 4 songs. And so for us, an hour and a half is plenty normally. Not everyone on your worship team is like on the A team. And people do this differently too. Like the guy I was talking with that did once a month, they had one team that's every single week. I have like 4 different bass players, but only 2 or 3 different keys players and 2 drummers, so they never are playing at the same rhythm. So I don't have like different teams, but every once in a blue moon you'll get like everybody who's the best on that one week, and they don't even need to rehearse probably. And then you'll have other weeks where it's like, man, we're really struggling this week, we need more time. So for us normally though, to get through 4 songs, and maybe one of those is a brand new song, an hour and a half, we usually get out early. So we start at 6. Somebody might come in a little late, but that's enough for sound check, prayer, a small devotion, and to play through each song twice. And then Sunday mornings is when we work through transitions. So we're just trying to make sure they know the chords, know the the sequence, the map of the song, and that's the stuff we're looking for.
I asked that because, and I'll just speak from my experience, and then if you're watching this video, put this in your own context. This isn't a hard and fast rule, but for me, I do like an hour and a half rehearsal as well. So ours is on Thursday nights from 6 to 7:30. But I was just thinking, like, if I can't lead my team through preparing for Sunday in an hour and a half, then I haven't planned well enough to lead the rehearsal. And like, that's the selfishness, is not putting in the time beforehand to make sure that I'm prepared to lead the rehearsal and make sure that people are resourced well enough so that they can learn the songs on their own. So for Jimmy and I, that's an hour and a half. You decide what it is for your team and where they're at for their current skill level, but decide, like, is it an hour and a half? Is it 2 hours? And then tell yourself, if I can't do it in 2 hours, then I'm just not prepared enough, or whatever the context is for you.
Yeah, that's exactly where my brain was going, because I was like, that's only true for us because I put up the set list. I try to stay about a month ahead on the song. So I schedule 2 months ahead. I put songs up a month ahead. I try to do that. It's at least 3 weeks, and I've given them everything they need, which is a correct chord chart and an MP3 in the right key, and then I've been adding a practice track, which has the cues and the click, because we do run Ableton. So those are the 3 things I get them a month ahead of time. If they have that a month ahead of time, and you've communicated that to them, there's no reason why you shouldn't be able to get through 4 songs. Now, the only reason it would change is if you're like, oh, well, we do 8 songs of service. Well, then it's going to take longer, you know. We usually do 4, sometimes 5, sometimes 3. So sometimes it's just like, hey, let's just worship through these songs tonight. We know these. None of these are new, but let's spend some time worshiping, you know. And I say that at the beginning, and then we'll practice transitions or whatever.
Yeah, that reminds me of I have a worship rehearsal blueprint that I put together, where it's a plan for your worship rehearsal. But the very first thing on there before you actually create the plan for your worship rehearsal is to set a starting time and an ending time. And so it's like, before you actually create the plan for whatever you want your rehearsal to look like, you decide how long is this going to be, and then you fit everything within that context. So if you need a plan for your worship rehearsal, Jimmy will link that worship rehearsal blueprint down below. It's a step-by-step guide that lets you lead your team well, not just musically, but also spiritually and relationally as well. So check that out in the description below.
Yeah, I'll definitely link that down there, and that's a great resource. And that's about it. The only other thing was, sometimes we can get selfish in how we talk to our team, making everything about us. It's kind of like when we're talking to the people out there. We can be that way with our team, making everything about us, like we're the diva. And so remember, if this is the last thing, serve your team. Serve your team. Like you mentioned the scripture earlier, like Christ came not to be served, but to serve. And if he is the king of the universe and he came to serve, you can do it. You can do it. You cannot let selfishness usurp your service to your team. Ding, 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 ding. Man.
A practical part
yeah.
on that, to think about serving your team, because I'm all about what can you actually do with this information this week. Ask your team this question: what can I do to serve you better this month? Or whatever. I like to ask that question like during the transition period. So like, we're headed into Christmas. So like, this Christmas season, what can I do to serve you better? Or if you're watching this video when the New Year's coming up, on the first worship rehearsal of the new year, hey, I want to focus on serving you guys better this year. What can I do to serve you better? And that opens up the conversation for people to be like, you know, it would be helpful if I had this in my preparation, like the guide tracks that Jimmy was talking about sending out. Maybe you don't do that, but people tell you that would be helpful. So just ask that question: what can I do to serve you better this year?
Man, that's great. And I find myself, I probably don't even ask that enough. I don't know when's the last time I've asked that. I've been a volunteer for so long that I know what I would want, so I just put myself in their position. But some of us have been out of that for so long, we forget, or we don't think about it, or we're too selfish to think about it. And we let that usurp our worship ministry goals of serving. Ding, ding. So yeah, I think that's great. Man, so yes, check the link to the free resource. You mentioned the blueprint. Rehearsal Blueprint.
Yes.
Boom. Check that out. Go grab that for free. I'll link that down below. Make sure you are subscribed to this channel right now. The little red button right there. Also, you have a YouTube channel.
I have a YouTube channel. It's called Leading Worship Well. I'm sure it'll be linked. You know, YouTube just added the handles feature. Did you see that?
Yes. So mine's at Hey Worship Leader.
Mine's at Leading Worship Well. So you can tag that, and then people can click on that. Somewhere even in the title you can add it. So.
I'm going to do it. I bet they're watching this right now. They're like, yeah, we know. It's right there. We're seeing it right now.
That's right here.
Okay, we can leave it there. Thank you guys for being here. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next video. Bye.